This is the Chris Berry Show. Expert information on elder law, retirement, and estate planning. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
And welcome to the Chris Berry Show. My name is Chris Berry, where every week we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And each week on the Chris Berry Show, we like to start off with a positive focus, something positive that happened the last week. We always start our dinners off with a positive focus. Likewise, we think it's important to start the Chris Berry Show off with something positive. So I'm going to share a couple things, actually. The first thing was I had a great time this past weekend with my family. We took the kids to Belle Isle, which I hadn't been to in maybe 5 or probably longer than that. It must have been maybe 8 years or so. I went there last time as part of a group. I'm a little hobby photographer, and we were taking some great pictures around Detroit. We visited the Packard plant and got some great shots of the GM Renaissance Center from just the shores of Belle Isle. So it was great to be back there, just see all of the resurgence that's happened since the last time I was there. And so we had the opportunity to hit up the aquarium, which my kids absolutely loved. They're really into nature right now, so they enjoyed seeing the different species of poisonous frogs there. We saw a chameleon. Well, actually, it was kind of funny. We didn't see the chameleon, which was kind of a running joke because it seems like the zoos will put up a spot that says, hey, try to find the chameleon, but there's never one in there, it seems like. Either that or I just can't find it. But the kids got a kick out of it. We saw some eels. They had some stingrays there. So if you haven't been to the aquarium, it's pretty nice. And it's one of the oldest aquariums in the nation, which I was unaware of. And then from the aquarium, we were able to then head over to the nature center, which they had a great time there, seeing some of the snakes, seeing the bees. There's a beehive there. And then I'd never been to the museum there, and so we toured the museum. It was a lot bigger in there than I thought it was, but it was great seeing some of the Detroit history, and the kids really got a kick out of it. So it was great to visit Belle Isle this weekend. If you haven't been there, I recommend you check it out. It's certainly worth it, and exciting to see the rebuilding going on there. And then at professional level, one of the exciting things was that we received some news on a trademark that we filed. So one of the things that makes our practice relatively unique is that we have a special type of asset protection trust that's been utilizes principles really since the 90s. So it's not necessarily a new concept, but just the way that we put it together, we decided to trademark. So we have this special type of trust called a castle trust, which is a form of asset protection trust that can protect against lawsuits and nursing home costs. And so we filed a trademark on it and just heard this past weekend from the trademark office that we're working through that it's went live, and now it's in a publication phase where there's about 30 days as long as we don't have anyone challenging the trademark, then it's going to go through and it's going to be effective. So we're pretty excited about that because a lot of our clients have been really liking this idea of the Castle Trust. And again, it's not like it's anything new. It's been the concepts that it's built on have been around since the 90s. But what makes it unique is that it's a way to put assets into a trust so that they can be protected against lawsuits. But then the big thing is that it helps qualify for Medicaid if long-term care in a nursing home is ever required. Because what it does is it starts a 5-year clock where if you can make it 5 years from the time you move assets into this Castle Trust, then everything inside of the trust would be protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. Because Medicaid looks back 5 years to see if you've moved any money around. So this is a way to protect your assets from that devastating cost of long-term care so that you can have Medicaid pay that base level of care, and then if there's resources in the Castle Trust, they can be accessed to pay for additional services. Or if you're a married couple and one spouse needs long-term care in a nursing home, you don't have to spend down your assets to that $2,000 asset limit that Medicaid requires. And again, this Castle Trust, it's not like it's a new concept. It's just the way that we put it together. This asset protection trust in the form of a Castle Trust is relatively new. But again, it's based on principles from the 90s. So it's something that's already been tested. And it's something that it's approved by the government. And the reason I can say that is twofold. First of all, when attorneys have been putting together trusts like this since the 90s, so much to the fact that in 2006, the look-back period for Medicaid, it used to be 3 years, and they changed it to 5 years. And so that tells us that the government's aware of this type of planning, utilizing trusts like a castle trust. But then also what it does is it tells us that the government doesn't look unfavorably to it. So it's something that's been proven and tested. And the reason I can say that is when the government changed that look-back period from 3 years to 5 years in 2006, if we had sat down and executed a castle trust in 2005, then they would have allowed us to keep that 3-year look-back period, meaning it would have grandfathered in that type of planning. So again, it's not like it's anything new, but just the way that we put it together is slightly different. And so we were able to trademark the term castle trust. So that we're pretty excited about that, pretty excited to have that trademark so that if you see any other firms out there talking about castle trust, we're the ones that started it. So it's pretty exciting to have that good news. And then also, I guess I have 3 positive focuses, is that our firm is growing. We're in the process of hiring another attorney, as well as we just brought on a marketing and education coordinator, Tina. So this was the day I'm talking to you today, but when we brought her on, this is her first week. So we're pretty excited to have her on board. She's just getting ramped up and started. So we're excited about that. Now, I always like to start with a positive focus, but there was a tough event that happened this past week, and it happened to my son, Ryan. And I live on a lake in Brighton Township, and unfortunately, my son, he was playing on the dock, and he fell and hit his head and got beat up pretty bad from the fall. And he has braces right now, which it's crazy to think that they're putting braces on 7-year-olds. I remember I had braces when I was a teenager, but apparently now they do 2 sets of braces. But unfortunately, when he fell, he hit his lip pretty bad, where his lip was stuck in his braces. And he has this kind of nasty-looking cut on his face. And the poor guy, he handled it like a champ, but it was pretty rough for him last couple of days. And it reminded me of when I was, I think, in 2nd grade. I actually got a scar on my face where you can still see the scar where I lifted my head up just as my cat was jumping over my face. And he got me pretty good back then. And apparently this doc got my son pretty good this week. But it brings up the point that you never know when life's going to throw you a curveball. We had some plans the next day, but based on how my son was feeling, we weren't able to do those plans. And so we can have the perfect plan in place, but you never know when life's going to throw you a curveball. And so that's why a lot of what we talk about on the Chris Berry Show and what we do is trying to protect against those things happening. Bad things in life happen, but there's certain steps you can take where if they do happen, you can be in a better position than if you hadn't planned ahead. So if you remember our previous episodes, we talked to Andrew, CEO, who talked about property and casualty insurance, umbrella policies, and what you can do to try to make sure that you have the best home and auto policy possible. And then in the next segment, what we're going to do is we're going to dive deeper into insurance, other forms of insurance. And really that's insurance. The whole idea is that bad things happen in life, and what are the things that you can do to try to protect yourself? So in our next segment, we're going to talk about 2 forms of insurance. So last week we talked about property and casualty insurance, where we had a special guest expert on the Chris Berry Show. This week we're going to talk about long-term care. Both Pure is the old form, which was the pure traditional long-term care insurance, which people really aren't a huge fan of because of all the premium increases and the fact that if you pass away peacefully in your sleep without utilizing it, that money is lost. And then also we're going to talk about asset-based long-term care, which is think of it as a new and improved way to answer the long-term care question. And then we're going to dive deeper into life insurance as well. And we're going to talk about different types of life insurance, whether term or permanent life insurance, and the different uses for especially permanent life insurance. And again, it's not fun to think about disability and taxes and death, but these are things that happen. You never know when life's going to throw you a curveball, just like my son found out that hitting your face on a dock isn't the best idea. Likewise, if we're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, it's not something that we want to happen, but life does happen. So what can we do to make sure that we protect our second half of life, to make sure that we have the best quality of life possible? So that's going to be our second segment today on the Chris Berry Show. And then our third segment, as always, we're going to get into our listeners' questions, and then we're going to cover some of the answers. So you can submit a question to us at any time by giving us a call at 810-355-2584, or you can email us at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. Again, askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. Or you can head to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, where there's a spot where you can submit a question via the website. And if we get a chance, we'll read your questions on air and provide some answers. And that'll be our third segment today on the Chris Berry Show. And I'm excited to announce some upcoming guests that we're going to have. So actually next week, we're going to have Maggie Gibbons back from the Alzheimer's Association because our Alzheimer's Walk is coming up. And we're big supporters of the Alzheimer's Association and the Walk to End Alzheimer's, where last year, as a team, we raised over $11,000. As a walk, we raised over $137,000 to go to the fight to end Alzheimer's. This year, the walk is going to be occurring September 29th. Registration opens up at 9 a.m. The walk begins at 10:45 a.m. We're expecting to have over 1,000 walkers this year. And so far this year, we've raised about $4,000 on our way to our goal of raising, again, over $10,000. So we're going to have Maggie Gibbons next week talking about the Walk to End Alzheimer's. And also this month, Wednesday, September 19th at 6 p.m. at our Brighton location, we're going to have the 10 Signs of Dementia, which is a very interesting workshop. I'm going to be attending the workshop. I'm not going to be the presenter there. We're going to have someone from the Alzheimer's Association. But if you do want to register for that 10 Signs of Dementia free workshop, you can call and register directly at the Alzheimer's Association by calling 800-272-3900. So if you do have a loved one that you think might be showing some of the signs of dementia and you want to learn more about that, you can attend our free workshop, 10 Signs of Dementia, hosted by the Alzheimer's Association. It'll be right at our Brighton office, 6 p.m. on September 19th. And to register for that, please call the Alzheimer's Association directly at 800-272-3900. And if you've ever had a loved one who's been affected from Alzheimer's and want to join our team, or even donate, and any donations are charitable gifts, please go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, and you can click through to our website where you can make a donation to the Alzheimer's Association, or you can also join our team if you plan on walking with us on September 29th. We've been reaching out to our clients, and we've had a lot of commitments that they're going to be joining us on that day. So if you do want to join us for that walk, please visit our website at thechrisberryshow.com or shoot me an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. So in addition to our Alzheimer's workshop that we have coming up, we also have one of our wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life workshop. We do these about once a week at one of our different locations. And so if you do want information on that, you can, again, go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com. But we have those workshops about once a week. And actually this Friday, so Friday the 24th, that's the wrong date. If you go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, you can find a list of our upcoming workshops. But actually, Thursday, the 30th, we're going to be having a workshop at our Livonia office. So that's Thursday, the 30th at 10 a.m. We're going to have a workshop, Planning for the Second Half of Life, How to Protect Your Family in 3 Easy Steps. So if you're interested in the topics that we cover on the Chris Berry Show, give us a call to register for that Livonia workshop on Thursday the 30th at 10 a.m. at our Livonia office. And you can register by going to by calling us at 810-355-2584. Again, 810-355-2584. In the workshops, it's always great to be able to ask questions. So I know we do have a question and answer session on the show every third segment, but it's a great way to get your questions answered in person. And we actually encourage that at our workshops. And again, we do them about once a week, and we do encourage questions right there, and you can get your answers live. And we joke around to say that it's the best time you can ever spend with an attorney because it's free time together. So if you are interested in that, give us a call, 810-355-2584. And then again, in our next segment, we're going to talk about long-term care insurance. We're going to talk about life insurance. And again, we've done this in the past, but for the listeners of the Chris Berry Show, I've co-written a book called Tax-Free Money for Long-Term Care. So for the first, we'll do 10 callers who call in or email in requesting a copy of that. Provide your name, full name, and address, and we'll send you out a copy of the Tax-Free Money for Long-Term Care, which covers some of the topics we're going to cover in our next segment. So if you do want that, give us a call, 810-355-2584, and then join us after the break as we get into talking about insurance on a deeper dive. So last week we talked about property and casualty insurance, how to protect yourself that way. In this next segment, we're going to get into talking about long-term care, both the old traditional form, which a lot of people shy away from, as well as the new form, asset-based long-term care, where a lot of people are transitioning from that old form to that new form. And we'll talk about why in the next segment. Then we're going to get into some uses of life insurance other than just that death benefit. So join us after the break on The Chris Berry Show. Thank you.
The cost of care for an elderly loved one or a loved one with a chronic illness is shockingly expensive. If you are dealing with the unbelievable cost of care, make sure you get all the benefits you're entitled to. Here's certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton.
Most of my clients are really concerned about long-term care costs. They don't know where to turn, and what we can do is put together legal strategies to protect your resources and also bring in additional resources to help pay that cost of care. One of the things that they often say is that I wish I knew about this years prior. And unfortunately, the information's out there, but there's just so few certified elder law attorneys. As the only certified elder law attorney in Livingston County, it's my job to make sure that our seniors, our loved ones, our veterans have the best quality of care possible and the best quality of life possible.
Protect your hard-earned assets from probate, long-term care costs, and the IRS. The Elder Care Firm will get you the governmental benefits you deserve, including veterans benefits and Medicaid. Visit theeldercarefirm.com and schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation. That's theeldercarefirm.com.
Welcome back to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And in this segment, we're going to get into some different types of insurance, different uses of insurance, specifically long-term care insurance, as well as life insurance. And we think it's important because a lot of times when people get near retirement, they've worked so hard to accumulate their wealth, accumulate assets. And then too often people just jump to the distribution phase of retirement. And in reality, we need to work on preservation. Make sure that if life throws you a curveball, that your assets last as long as you do. So with that, we have to look at insurance as a piece of the puzzle. Now, it's not fun, it's not sexy to think about insurance, but it is a necessity. And so last week, we had Andrew, CEO, discuss property and casualty, how to insure your home, your car, your toys, that type of thing. Now we're going to talk about insuring yourself, and we're going to look at it from two aspects. One, from long-term care costs, which really is, we call it the devastating cost of long-term care. And it's something that's popping up more and more because we're living longer. And then on the flip side of the coin is going to be life insurance. And we're going to talk about some different ways to use life insurance beyond just the traditional death benefit. So first, let's focus on the long-term care piece. And if what we're talking about interests you and you want some more another resource on this, then make a request for a free copy of our tax-free Money for Long-Term Care book. And you can give us a call at 810-355-2584. Leave us a message with your name and address, and we'll put that in the mail to you. Or you can email us at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. So for the first 10 listeners, like I said in the last segment, for the first 10 listeners, we'll put a copy in the mail to you. So all you have to do is request that. That's our tax-free Money for Long-Term Care book, which is going to provide some additional guidance on what we're going to be describing here today. So long-term care, it's not fun to think about. It's a lot of people want to put their head in the sand and just say it's not going to happen to me. I've had people come up and ask about states that have euthanasia because they never want to set foot in a nursing home. But unfortunately, what's happening is that we're living longer and we're needing long-term care more often than not. I think the current statistic is that 3 out of 4 people will need some form of long-term care, and 1 out of 2 will set foot in a nursing home. And the average stay in a nursing home is 2.5 years, according to a recent MetLife study. So if that's the case, and nursing homes around Metro Detroit costing $8,000 to $12,000, $13,000 a month, the question is, how in the world are we going to go ahead and pay for this? And so that's where long-term care can be a piece of the puzzle and can be a big piece of the puzzle, as well as asset protection trusts like the Castle Trust, like we talked about last segment. So long-term care should be a piece of the puzzle. Now, in the past, the only answer to the question of how to pay for long-term care utilizing insurance was pure or traditional long-term care insurance policy. In fact, I remember my parents looking at a pure traditional long-term care insurance policy a number of years ago. In fact, I had a pure traditional long-term care insurance policy, but I've let it lapse. And the reason for that is now we have what's called asset-based long-term care, which kind of takes a different approach to planning for long-term care. So if you're unfamiliar, a long-term care policy, a traditional long-term care insurance policy, the way it works is that an insurance company would underwrite you, basically kind of figure out your health and weight and age and that type of thing, and then based on that, promise to pay some benefit as long as you paid the premiums. Now, that makes sense, but the issue was that a lot of these insurance companies would hike up the premiums. So you could be paying on a long-term care insurance policy for 20 years, and then in that 21st year, they could then hike up your premiums. And we saw this happen. I had a colleague of mine, his mom was paying on a policy for a number of years, and then all of a sudden suffered from a 40% premium increase, which when you're on a fixed budget is pretty hard to handle. But it wasn't as hard as the following year. They hiked it up another 80%. I was talking to a colleague recently, and he saw a policy go up 114%, which is just outstanding. You can't even imagine that, especially if you're on a fixed budget. So that leaves you with a question of, do I pay the higher premium, which I'm not sure I can afford? Do I take a reduction in benefits right when I start needing the policy, or do I let the policy lapse? So that's the biggest issue with that traditional long-term care insurance policy, is you don't really know what you're going to get. They could hike up the premiums on you at any time. And then the other big issue was, well, what happens if I've been paying on this for my whole life and I pass away peacefully in my sleep? Where does that money go? Well, it's left to the insurance company. You lose. So you don't get anything, even though you've paid on it for 15, 20, 25 years. So it's almost like renting an apartment or renting a house. Every year they could hike up your rent on you. You're not in control. And then if you were to move out or move away, guess what? You're not walking away with anything. You have no equity. And so from that, that's where asset-based long-term care comes into play. And it has a great answer to those two questions, or those two problems of traditional long-term care insurance policy. Now, to get asset-based long-term care, you do need to have assets. But then the great thing about this is if you do have assets, specifically qualified money, so money like IRAs or 401ks, and a lot of the clients do have IRAs and 401ks. And the thing with those they are pre-tax. Okay, so I'm not talking about your Roths, but they're pre-tax. And so with that pre-tax money, if all of your wealth is in pre-tax money and you suffered a stroke or diagnosed with dementia or Parkinson's or need long-term care, first of all, how would you want to pay for that care? Or where would you pay for that care? And it'd have to come out of your IRA money. And if I were to ask you where would you want to receive care, you'd probably say at home. So with this asset-based long-term care, what we're able to do is leverage or utilize that qualified money to protect the rest of it from the devastating cost of long-term care. So let's look at an example. Let's say you have an IRA of $300,000, okay? And what we do is we transition $100,000 of that to a new IRA utilizing this asset-based long-term care program. Still pre-tax, still yours. You can take that money back at any time. But now, just because we've moved where that traditional IRA is to a new IRA that falls under this Pension Protection Act that kind of created some incentives to build in long-term care as part of a retirement plan, now that $100,000 could be leveraged so that you could have a lifetime $5,000 a month long-term care benefit. And granted, I'm just kind of making up numbers because it depends on health and age and that type of thing. But if we could take $100,000, it remains yours. But now if you were to need long-term care, you're going to receive $5,000 a month for the rest of your life. And if you're married, it could be $5,000 for each of you for the rest of your life. That's pretty powerful. And guarantee no premium increases, even if there might not even be a premium depending on how we set things up. And then what happens if you pass away in your sleep? Well, that $100,000 could end up being a $200,000 tax-free death benefit to your beneficiaries. So with this asset-based long-term care, we've answered the question of how can we pay for long-term care in a tax-free way. And then also we've answered the two problems that traditional long-term care insurance has. The fact of premiums shooting up on you. The fact that if you pass away peacefully in your sleep, nothing is left for your beneficiaries. So that's the answer, is asset-based long-term care. Now, you do have to have assets, and there's certain requirements, and it's not right for everyone, just like anything else when it comes to planning for the second half of life. There's no magic wands. Everything is a tool, and you need to make sure if the tool is right for you. But what a lot of people are finding, that if you do have one of these traditional long-term care insurance policies, looking at whether an asset-based long-term care policy probably makes sense. In fact, this past week, and I shared this on the Chris Berry Show Facebook page. So we do have a Facebook page where that'd be another place where you can ask questions, and it's linked on our website. But I shared there that I think Genworth or GE is looking at petitioning some of the states to do I think it was a 53% price increase on their traditional pure long-term care insurance policies. And that's, again, just one of those reasons that it might make sense to take a look at asset-based long-term care. Now, it might be tough thinking that, I've paid on this for 15, 20 years, and I won't have anything to show for it. But if we can take a look at giving you more benefits for less cost moving forward, then that's something that you should probably take a look at. So that's kind of long-term care insurance in a nutshell. We have two forms. We have the asset-based long-term care, which a lot of people that appeals to, and then we have the pure traditional old form of long-term care insurance. And if you do want some more information on that, please, and this is for the first 10 listeners of the Chris Berry Show, give us a call or shoot us an email and request a copy of that tax-free money for long-term care. And you can request by giving us a call at 810-355-2584 or shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And now we're going to talk about life insurance. And life insurance, surprisingly, can also answer the long-term care question as well. So we have two main types of life insurance. We have pure or term life insurance. And the way term life insurance works is that you basically say to the insurance company, okay, over the next 20 or 30 years, I'm going to pay you a premium. And then if I pass away during that term, during that period, then you pay out to my beneficiaries. So let's say I buy a term life insurance policy this year. If I make it, if I were to pass away within the next 20 years, My beneficiaries win because I've died and they paid out a life insurance benefit, but I've lost because I've died. Now, what happens if I live past that 20 years? Well, I win because I'm still alive. Life insurance wins because they didn't have to pay anything out, but my beneficiaries lose because they don't get that death benefit. So basically, you're ensuring that you're going to stay alive over a period of time. A lot of times this is used if you have young children, if maybe you have a mortgage, or some responsibilities. So that's term life insurance. Pretty straightforward. Now we also have what's called permanent life insurance. Now, what differentiates permanent life insurance from term life insurance is that permanent life insurance has a cash value built into there. For example, with a term policy, if 10 years in I called up the insurance company and said, hey, I want to cash this out, give me all my money back, that's not going to happen. Versus a permanent life insurance, there is a cash value that gets built into that. And the nice thing about that cash value is that depending on the type of policy, it might be what's called an index universal life insurance policy, where that cash value, that investment is tied to an index. For example, the S&P. So if the S&P goes up 10%, that index universal life insurance policy will go up some amount. It's not going to be that full 10%. There's going to be some type of spread or cap typically. So instead of going up 10%, it might go up 5%. But if the S&P goes down 10%, the nice thing with that index universal life insurance policy is that you don't lose. Okay, so it almost works like an annuity in that sense. But the great thing about an index universal life insurance policy, in addition to the death benefit, is that you get tax-free growth. So it's almost like a Roth in that sense, that the money that you invest in an index universal life insurance policy can grow tax-free, and then you can take out that value, that growth, through loans or taking out that cash value. And when that money comes out, the magical thing is that it's tax-free. So what that means is it's an option for planning for college expenses to go along with a 529. It's an option for retirement planning, where when you turn 70 and a half, you know that you have to take out your required minimum distributions from your 401ks and your IRAs. And if it's a traditional account, you have to take that money out and you pay tax on it. But if you have an index universal life insurance policy and you're taking that money out in retirement at age 70 and a half or after, it doesn't really matter because it's tax-free. It's money coming out tax-free. You've already paid the income tax on it. So it's almost like a Roth in that sense. And then also, what about the death benefit on an index universal life insurance policy? So that might be something that initially you're interested in. If you have young children and you're looking to pay for college, you want to make sure if you pass away that money is available for college. But what happens in retirement? Are you concerned about that death benefit? Probably not. But the nice thing about some types of policies is that they could be set up so that death benefit could be create a long-term care benefit as well, which in retirement, a lot of people are more concerned about long-term care costs than making sure that their beneficiaries get some large inheritance. So with an index universal life insurance policy, you can create that tax-free growth. Now, it's not going to be as a great a return as what you would have in the market, but it is money that's growing tax-free. And then the death benefit, while you're younger, you might be interested in that for taking care of minor children, paying college expenses, paying off a mortgage. But then in retirement, you probably already took care of college for the kids and maybe you've paid off your mortgage, but that death benefit can also double as a long-term care benefit. So you're able to answer that question of long-term care as well as tax-free money in retirement. So that's a little more of an advanced approach to looking at life insurance than just your pure traditional term life insurance. Now, it's not right for everyone. And again, on the Chris Berry Show, we just talk about different tools, and it's important to match up the right individual with the right tool. But our approach is all about education. And so we want to make sure that we explore all the tools, understand how they work, so that we're able to select the right tools for the right situation, which is always very important. And so join us on the next segment as we're going to get into some questions and answers, questions submitted by our listeners, as well as answers that we'll provide. And it's just general guidance. It's not your individual legal, financial, or tax advice. Make sure to sit down with a professional. But we'll get into some questions and general answers on the next segment of the Chris Berry Show. And then make sure to join us next week as we're going to have Maggie Gibbons from the Alzheimer's Association. So join us after the break. Thank you.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Sherry Skelton and her family did from Fenton.
It's really scary when you know that your parent deserves a certain quality of life and you're not able to afford it unless you get these benefits. And that was the place where we were at. We were like, we couldn't take care of her. We all had families of our own. We all worked. And of course, we wanted her in the best possible place that we could afford. And none of that would have been, we never would have been able to do that if it wasn't for them. I always recommend Chris. And I always tell people when they have any questions, I just say, you know what, you need to contact this guy because I can't even begin to tell you what he did for my family.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800.
And welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And our last segment, we talked about some uses of insurance, long-term care and life insurance. And if you want some more information specifically on that long-term care piece, make sure to request a free copy of our tax-free Money for Long-Term Care book by giving us a call at 810-355-2584 or shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. For the first 10 listeners this week, we'll put a copy in the mail. If you give us your full name and address, we'll send that along. Now we're going to get into some of the questions submitted from our listeners over this past week. And actually, the first question is something that one of my clients asked me, and I thought I would share it. So this wasn't from a listener. This was from a client. I can't name any names, but the question is, am I on the hook for my spouse's medical bills? My spouse passed away with lots of medical bills. Do I have to pay those? We have a house owned jointly, and I was a beneficiary of her retirement accounts. So here's the situation. We have husband and wife. Wife passed away but had a lot of outstanding medical bills. And husband was worried about what happens to the house. Will I have to sell my house to pay off these bills? What happens to the retirement account? And so it varies state by state, but the way it works in Michigan, and we have to take a step back and understand, first of all, how do assets transition out of someone's name when they pass away? And we only have 4 ways, either through joint ownership, so if they're joint on a checking account. Second would be through beneficiary designations, so beneficiary of an IRA, of a life insurance policy. Third would be through a trust, so we could have a castle trust or a revocable living trust. But if an asset doesn't pass through joint ownership, beneficiary designation, probate, or joint ownership, beneficiary designation, trust, then it ends up going into probate. And that's what we want to try to avoid. So now that we understand how assets transition upon death, let's get back to this question. Am I on the hook for my spouse's medical bills when she passes away? And again, this varies state by state. So Michigan is one of the states that does not have, it's a hard to pronounce word, familial responsibility. Basically what that means is because of a family relation, you are now on the hook for that family member's debts. We see this a lot with regards to nursing home care. Am I on the hook for my parents' nursing home care? So Michigan does not have that familial, easy for me to say, responsibility law. So we have these creditors, these medical bills. So they're a creditor now. So what happens when wife passes away is that, well, creditors have to get in line, but they can only attach to any assets that go through probate. So as long as the house avoids probate, as long as the beneficiary designations are titled properly, then there shouldn't be any assets ending up in probate, specifically with a married couple. So these medical bills, the medical providers, they're what's called an unsecured creditor, similar to like a credit card. Now that's different than a secured creditor, like a mortgage. Okay, a mortgage, the house is the security. So if you default on the mortgage, they can take the house. With these medical bills, just like a credit card, they're an unsecured creditor. So their only option would be to open up a probate and make a claim against the probate estate. Now, in this situation, it sounds like there's not going to be any assets going through probate. So first of all, the medical providers would have to petition the court to open up a probate, which is going to be a hassle. And then B, there's not even going to be any assets in the probate administration. So there's nothing that they can really claim to. Now, you do have to be careful and watch what you sign when you're signing to admit someone to assisted living or a nursing home or a hospital. You don't want to be a co-payer or a co-signer on these things. If you're a co-signer, then you could be held liable. For example, if it was a credit card and it was in both of your names, both of you are on the account, you would then be held liable. But if these medical bills were just for the spouse, and the spouse passes away and everything ends up avoiding probate, then the creditors they don't really have anything that they can make a claim against. Now, I'm not recommending you go run up a bunch of credit cards or anything like that. But when I was talking this over with this client, you should have seen the sense of relief that he had, that his home wouldn't have to be sold just because of his wife's medical bills. So hopefully that was helpful. That wasn't a question from a listener, but I thought it would be interesting to share that information with the listeners of the Chris Berry Show. So the next question, this was from a listener. What should we do when we receive a big check from a family in the amount of more than $100,000? That would be nice. And this is from Levi. My wife and I are both in our 50s and are expecting a large check from her father's estate in the amount of about $100,000. It's in the final stages of process, and we should receive our portion within 90 days. Question is, what should we do with this check once we receive it? Well, what I would say is you donate it to the Alzheimer's Association, which you just kidding. But again, we are big supporters of the Alzheimer's Association. If you do want to donate, you can go to thechrisberryshow.com and click through the link. All of your donations, of course, are charitable in nature. They're a 501c3. So getting back to the question, this is from Levi. I'm going to have to give you the lawyer question of it depends, because I don't really know where you're at. I don't know what your goals are in terms of retirement. I don't know if you have debts to pay off. But whenever I get a question like this, I direct people back to our approach of financial planning, which is that bucket plan approach of organizing your money in 3 buckets. So you have one bucket, which is our now bucket. So this is your emergency fund. This is your income needs over the next year or so, especially if you're retired. This is any planned expenses that you have. So that would be one place to look, Levi, is your emergency fund at a level that you feel comfortable, whether that's $20,000 or $50,000. This money should be safe, liquid, think checking, savings, money market, that type of thing. So if you have debt, maybe look at paying off your debt. If it's bad debt, good debt would be low interest rate debt like maybe a mortgage or student loans, depending on your situation. And then look to your emergency fund. So have you built up your emergency fund to a level that you feel comfortable with? And then if that's the case, then I would look at the other buckets that we talk about. So the later bucket is money that you don't think you're going to need over the next 10 years. So that's money that's invested for long-term growth, maybe long-term care costs in the future, maybe a legacy. So if one spouse passes away, making sure that surviving spouse isn't impoverished by the fact that they have to pay more in taxes, potentially, being being a single filer for tax purposes. And then if the later bucket, that might be a good approach. So that might be something more aggressive depending on your volatility tolerance. Or the soon bucket. Our soon bucket is money we think we might need over the next 10 years. So do you feel comfortable that you have your income needs met over your next 10 years? Looks like you're in your 50s, so you're probably still working. So given that, if you're still working, you probably have your income needs met over the next 10 years, assuming you plan on continuing to work. But maybe you have a big expense coming up. Maybe when you hit 60, there's a big trip you want to take. So if that's the case, maybe you should place that money in more of soon bucket type investments, which would be safer, more conservative than the later bucket. So again, I like to filter any question like that through that bucket plan concept of when do I plan on using the money? That's going to determine where I should invest it. If I think I'm going to use it soon, over the next year, then it should be safe, liquid, maybe money markets, checking, savings. If I want to build up my emergency funds, then again, checking, savings, money market. If I think I'm going to invest it later, then maybe it should be invested more aggressively, maybe mutual funds with more of an equity leaning than a bond lean. If you think you're going to use the money kind of sooner rather than later, then maybe something more conservative, less invested in equities or the markets. So hopefully that was helpful, Levi. But again, I would start off with if you inherit $100,000, leaving it to the Alzheimer's Association makes a lot of sense if you want to go that route. That'll bring us to question number 3. So this is question number 3. Do grandchildren have a right to an inheritance? And does their name have to be on the will to receive it? And can they fight it? And so this is from Ronnie. So a grandparent passed away and the kids went and sold everything real quick and private-like. Well, Ronnie, unfortunately, grandchildren don't necessarily have a right. And again, it goes back to the ways assets pass out of someone's name when they pass away. So through joint ownership. That's one way assets can pass, like a checking account. You might be joint with someone else. Beneficiary designations. A lot of times people just name their kids as beneficiaries. Third would be through a trust. So when your grandparent passed, they might have had a trust that could have said it's left to the 3 kids. But let's say that your grandparent didn't pass things through joint ownership, didn't pass it through beneficiary designation, didn't pass it through a trust. Well, then what's left? Well, what's left is probate court. And there's 2 options in probate court. So one option would be that your grandparent had a will, had a last will and testament. And then if that's the case, then the assets would follow the terms of that will. And a lot of times the default is to say that I want my stuff to go evenly amongst my kids. That's what a majority of the wills say. But let's say that your grandparent didn't even have a will. So they died what's called intestate, meaning without a will. Then we would have to follow the default rules of Michigan. And the default rules of Michigan say that if you pass away without a will and you die intestate, then the assets are going to be go partially to a spouse and then to the children. And then if you don't have a spouse, then it's all going to go to the children. Okay? So in this case, Ronnie, if all of the children were alive, and your grandparent died intestate, then the money would be split amongst the children. Now let's say one of the children were to pass away. Well, then their share would go, we call it per stirpes, or flows down the bloodline, would go down to the next generation. So Ronnie, if your grandparent passed away and there was no will, and your parents, the direct child of that grandparent passed away, then you might be entitled to something. But it would depend on your parents passing away as well as your grandparents. And there has to be no will. So it sounds like chances are everything was handled properly and you're not necessarily entitled to anything, but there might be a chance depending on the situation. So I hope that's helpful for you, Ronnie. Now, the 4th question is from Larry. And Larry asks, is life insurance a good way to leave money to my children? Well, Larry, I want to answer this with it depends, because every situation is a little bit different, but life insurance is a great way to leverage money for that next generation. And we talked about in the last segment that there's more to life insurance than just the death benefit, that it can also provide a benefit to you for long-term care or tax-free retirement. But life insurance is a great way to leave tax-free money to the next generation. For example, let's say you are a beneficiary. Would you rather receive a traditional IRA or life insurance? Well, you might have to think about it for a second, but if you were to receive a traditional IRA, what needs to happen with that? You need to pay tax on that. Versus if you're to receive money as a life insurance benefit, that money is always tax-free. So life insurance is a great way to leverage funds for the next generation. But again, it's a tool, and you need to make sure that the tool is right for you given the right circumstances. So that'll take us to our 5th question. How can I get my deceased mother's money from the bank? And this is from Donald. She has money at the bank but passed away. So again, this falls into the 4 ways that assets transfer out of a deceased name upon death. So if that bank account was joint with someone else, then whoever is joint with it can get access to it. If that bank account had a transfer on death or payable on death designation, it's like a beneficiary designation for your checking or savings, then it goes to the beneficiary. If it was in trust, you probably wouldn't be asking this question. So I'm guessing that it was left in your mother's name. Well, if it's left in your mother's name and it's not through beneficiary designation, like a transfer on death or payable on death, and it wasn't joint and it's just in her name, then you're going to have to take a trip to probate court. Now, in probate, there's two routes that you can go. You can go, if the bank account was less than $22,000, it was $20,000, it's adjusted for inflation. So if the bank account was less than, I want to say $22,000, then you can go with a small estate affidavit procedure where it can be wrapped up within a day or so. So you walk into probate court, show that you've paid off the funeral bill, you pay the probate court some money, they'll give you a letter of authority that says that you can take over that account. Now, if it was more than $22,000, the good news is that it's more than $22,000. The bad news is that you have to go through the probate process, and you could do what's called an informal probate, where it's not in front of a judge or anything, but you still have to take a trip to probate court. But now you're looking at filing fees, inventory fees, publication fees, and by statute in Michigan, it has to take at least 5 months. So the minimum when you go through probate for an informal probate is 5 months. Sometimes it can take over a year. So now we really have to get the courts involved, and it's a big pain in the butt. So there's kind of a good side and the bad side. The good side would be, or the bright side would be that the account was over $22,000 that you're inheriting. The downside of that is that you have to take a trip through probate court, doing the full informal probate process that could last over 5 months. So hopefully that was helpful. And as always, if you do have questions that you want us to cover on air, shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com or give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. And you can always listen to past episodes of The Chris Berry Show either on iTunes or you can listen online at thechrisberryshow.com. And make sure to join us next week as we have Maggie Gibbons from the Alzheimer's Association talking about how important it is to think about Alzheimer's, especially as we're coming up with the end of the year. It can be a charitable donation to balance out taxes. And if you do want to make a tax donation to the Alzheimer's Association or help support our walk to end Alzheimer's, visit us at thechrisberryshow.com. And I look forward to joining you next week on The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life.
Learn more about Chris Berry and the Elder Care Firm by visiting online at MichiganEstatePlanning.com. That's MichiganEstatePlanning.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 888-390-4360. 888-390-4360. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the Elder Care Firm, Prosperity Capital Advisors, or the C.J. Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecast provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses, which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.
The cost of long-term care can be overwhelming. If you're dealing with long-term care costs, make plans to attend the next free informative workshop from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton. They'll show you how to protect your hard-earned assets and obtain the governmental benefits you deserve, including veterans benefits and Medicaid.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. As the only certified elder law attorney in Livingston County, I have the knowledge and estate planning strategies to help you. When you call, reserve your seat at our next workshop or schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. questions. Call us today.
Spots are filling up for the next free Elder Care Firm workshop. Reserve your seat today by calling 810-214-3800 or visit theeldercarefirm.com. The Elder Care Firm also invites you to join them at this year's Walk to End Alzheimer's. The walk is on Saturday, October 1st in downtown Brighton. Call 810-214-3800 today.